Okay, so next up we have Kris Curtis from Just Eat. We're on Operation Wildebeest. Kris, are you there?
I am, yes. Hello.
Perfect. Cool. Well, I shall hand over to you.
And can everyone see the slide?
Yep, we can see your slides and we can see you, so you can turn
Perfect.
yourself off if you don't
Oh no,
want.
no, I'm wearing my khaki. I'm ready for my for the safari. So let's get
It's
going.
all on character. Well, over to you, Kris.
So, Operation Wildebeest. A documentary team was able to film and capture never before seen footage of the natural behavior of Tableau workbooks in a natural environment. Roaming the open plains of Tableau Server, witness one of the marvels of the data world, a database migration. Survival of the fittest as Tableau workbooks make a perilous journey from one data source to another. Who will survive and who will fall victim to the predators? If you look carefully, you can see a small herd of Tableau workbooks grazing. Most days, they are there, gentle, calm creatures ready to be viewed. Spook them and they will bolt. Our Tableau server was home to about 3,000 workbooks. This herd of Tableau workbooks was growing for some time. The herd's population was growing unstable. It was difficult to pick out one workbook from the herd, which is the one for understanding our marketing campaigns, which one shows me sales by region. It was difficult to find the right workbook. People were getting lost in the Tableau wilderness. Each day, the workbooks would come to refresh from a stream of data from Amazon Redshift. For years, this Redshift stream flowed data into the Tableau server, kept the herd of workbooks population healthy. The population grew and grew. With nothing to keep the workbook herd in check, they were consuming all the resources of once a rich and fertile environment. This data stream was being consumed by the herd, as well as other data animals further upstream. It was drying up in places. There was a data drought. Data was being delayed. The workbooks had to queue up each day just to take a drink from the data stream to refresh. There were no real predators to trim the bloated, lazy workbooks. The old kept on living, and the young were multiplying at an alarming rate. Then the news came. The data stream was drying up. This would cut off the flow into the Tableau server. The herd would not be able to refresh each day. They had extracted too much from Redshift. The herd needed to find a new data source to refresh from. With Redshift being shut off, all the data was flowing into a larger, bigger data lake. Google BigQuery was located in a different environment, but it was big enough to make sure that the brave and strongest could live off it for many years to come. All they had to do was make it there. They had to travel through the unknown. Had anyone ever gone through a journey like this before? Sure, there were some stories, but no real footage. One mistake could be costly. Once they'd started, there was no turning back. They had to reach the new data lake before the old stream was turned off. This is the story of the Great Migration, Operation Wildebeest. We had a separated Tableau server landscape. We had 12 different Tableau sites, each home to a herd of workbooks. These herds ranged in size from around 80 to 100, to the largest herd of over 450. Collectively, they numbered over 3,000. They were taking a toll on both the data stream and the Tableau server. The resources were being consumed at an ever-increasing rate. There were many issues which impacted users: unable to access sites where content was shared between them, duplicated workbooks, workbooks not updating in time. These little things all impacted user experience. When it was decided that the data would stop flowing into Redshift and the data lake started to fill up, we knew that we had to relocate the herd of Tableau workbooks to a new natural habitat. It also gave the opportunity to fix the issues, improve content management and user experience. But first, migrating the workbooks. They had to be closer to the data lake. But searching the community, it seemed no one had witnessed a full migration like this. Sure, there were some stories, glimpses of the spectacle, but nothing documented or captured. There were so many questions. Where to start? What do we keep? How do we actually even do this? So the first step on this journey was planning. objectives. We had to set, my first task was to think and plan out what was going to be done, setting these objectives. And changing the data source from one system to another, that was the primary objective. We then had an opportunity to change our Tableau Server architecture to improve user experience. We had to establish better access for users and implement tighter governance controls. Learning from the past, we made sure that we spent the time, business had changed and our reporting structure had not. This was a chance to design a new site structure and content management. Finding and classifying the species that would visit the new environment. Who were our audiences? We had different types of users and how they used the system. By carefully planning and identifying these issues and concerns based on these user habits, we could actually create a narrative document which was able to explain and document and pass on to the business what we were going to do and how we were going to do it. Creating a narrative was a relatively new concept to me, but on projects like this, it was a valuable activity. It helped me articulate what was going to happen and be able to communicate it back to the business and how this was going to work. The second step was looking at the environment. It is set up the boundaries of the site and replicate a UAT and production environment. We were understanding should it look like our previous setup or should we change to a different view? What we decided was we created an environment with visitors in mind. We wanted them to come and to one destination, one place, to find any type of workbook they were looking for. Using the search feature, they could find it and go and view. The park, we set up the perimeter fencing and a set of projects for each market, consistent across them all. This was a big change from the past where each country had its own site. The issue was that when workbooks were shared across countries, not all users had access to the other sites. It was good that sharing was taking place, but we couldn't predict who was sharing what and what they were sharing with who, and was this always permitted or allowed. Retaining these country projects under the one site meant users could share when they needed to, but it was also maintaining the existing site structure that we had. Search could be used across the whole site, allowing users to explore content via themes and workbook names. So we had 3 different tiers. We had our country-based tier as tier 1. Tier 2 was a departmental level, and tier 3 was project level. Third step of the journey was understanding review and tagging. Understanding the stakeholder activity, what was being used. We had a clear setup decided, and we had to figure out which workbooks were up for the journey. Our criteria could have been seen as cruel, but we had to try and be as close to nature as possible. Survival of the fittest. Using Tableau Server Postgres repository to review workbook usage, this helped identify the types of workbooks that we were looking for. The old workbooks were culled, they'd served their purpose, and they helped create future generations, but their time was past. At closer inspection, many had incurable illnesses and were not behaving as they should be. They were missing parts, they were limping along and just blended into the herd. They should have been put out of their misery a long time ago. In a proper ecosystem, predators would have targeted them, allowing nature to take its course. Workbooks with no usage were also identified. The way to identify which workbooks were going to be migrated and which were not was through the use of tags. Once identified, workbooks were tagged. These tags were added to the metadata for a workbook and could be also used in search, but also in reporting via Postgres repository. We asked each of the workbook owners to tag their workbooks. Workbooks that were used frequently and were young and fit, healthy were tagged to migrate. This tagging of the workbooks was not something that we really practiced before. We identified the value it could add through aiding content management and discovery. The Postgres SQL repository has a table _tags, which can also be used to find all the tags used in your deployment. You can check the consistency, spelling, and formatting to make sure everything's aligned. The natural selection of these workbooks split the herd in two. It felt much more manageable for such a huge migration. Each analyst was then given a breakdown of the workbooks based on the tag, archive or migrate. The central team would take care of the workbooks tagged with archive, while the individual workbook owners would supervise the migration of the healthy workbooks. Once we could count and track our herd of workbooks, we could set targets and measure the progress. I researched many ways in which how we could move content between sites. Recent server features now allow a workbook to be moved easily between projects, but moving between sites is still a bit more of a difficult task, especially when there are hundreds of thousands of workbooks to migrate. Depending on your server version, tab command or TSM commands allow you to create a new project and export and import contents of sites. The REST API feature can also be used to publish workbooks to the sites. Interworks have a Power Tools product, which is called Power Tools for deployment, and it can help with these type of heavy lifting between sites, especially if you're running a development and production environment. It's a very useful tool, but there's a cost for that. And Tab Migrate is an open source project from Tableau, which means it's unsupported, but I selected this because it was easy to use, free, and hopefully this exercise was a one-off. So using Tab Migrate to move workbooks with new data sources to the new environment, it was a massive help. It allowed me to remove a large number of workbooks and that were marked for archive, and they were exported, zipped, and I could upload them into an Amazon 3 storage for preservation. Just to add on this, I received communications in February as an Interworks customer saying that Tableau have recently acquired Interworks Power Tools for Tableau products. This is only really recent, but I really hope that this means that there's some really cool things coming for Tableau Server as built-in features. The fourth step is looking at security. Setting the right security was also really important. In the past, security was not always about the setup in the right way. It led to heavy admin requests for access. Site administrators created local groups and they didn't manage these properly. People left and these groups became rogue, often poaching access to workbooks here and there. Our new site would be Active Directory groups only. Default permissions were set for everyone. A restricted project was created for each market with high permissions set. If people wanted access to this, they would have to request via central IT support. I was free from managing permissions. Now we had established the reduced number of workbooks herd which had to make the journey. We had decided where they would be housed and who would get access. It was time to open up the new site and begin the migration. Now that our new environment was built, our fencing was in place, it was safe to start moving the herd. We had a deadline and we needed to move a large number of workbooks. In a few cases, we were not sure if the workbook was able to refresh from the data lake just yet. Workbooks which had new data source available were started on their journey. The analyst who created and reviewed the workbook to confirm it was needed had to make the migration and replace the data source. They were given guidelines on how to complete the migration. This guideline document covered a lot of the issues that people were experiencing, mainly around field names between the existing and the new data sources. Once a new data source was successfully added and replaced, the existing data source of the work could be published. Some of the issues that we came up against were the different field names or missing field names from the new data source, losing calculated fields from extracted data sources, and Tableau has an automatic field name detection. So you can see the example there where it strips out the underscore in between field names. So sometimes if your source data table has additional underscore values, then they can sometimes be retained, which could cause an impact between when you're replacing the data source. So the final stage of the migration was around signposting. And this is one stage of the project where I didn't feel there was adequate support from the Tableau product. There was no way that an existing workbook URL could be redirected that I was aware of. We either had to kill the old link or circulate a new one. Or the workbook owner could keep the existing workbook live on the old location and insert a text box over the cover page with the newer URL. It wasn't the most professional look. Workbook owners then communicated the new destinations of these workbooks via emails and stakeholder meetings. They could also create hubs or landing pages that linked out to the new workbooks. One new URL which could be shared with users, but could also direct them to all the other workbooks relating to that project. The measurement of the project was used using the PostgreSQL repository. We tracked the progress using these data source tables. It gave us visibility of the workbooks tagged with the migrate function, and also all the workbooks that were using a Redshift data source. By joining with other tables, I could get the workbook owner and provide this information to project managers. This allowed blockers to be identified, such as missing data in the new data source, flagging up risks for data sources and tables who were created by people who had left the business. Weekly progress emails were scheduled via the workbook, and I created so the project team knew exactly what stage we were at, when we had to send communications out to chase people, and when we could celebrate milestones. With deadline day in sight, we had gone from over 3,000 workbooks using Redshift to now only 21 workbooks being viewed with a Redshift connection. Such a massive project was always going to throw up some challenges. There was a lot of discussion around resource and support. By carefully planning out and architecting a Tableau site, we were able to create a more clear and uncluttered destination. The data narrative process helped document exactly what the project was going to deliver. It formed a focal point to keep the momentum. The success that we have is clear. We are on track from a reporting perspective to completely turn off our Redshift database on time. The additional success this project has brought is the collaboration and knowledge sharing between departments and countries. It reflects our business model, one where a market succeeds and we can replicate and scale across other markets. Search has become so much more important when trying to find the right things. Signposting has also become an important element in our content management framework. We plan to build on our previous landing page and encourage analysts to create these knowledge hubs of workbooks, connecting users with their questions. The migration has come to an end, and sure, we lost a fair bit of the herd, but the ones who made it are stronger and fitter. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Kris. Not sure that there's any questions so far, so I'm just checking the chat. Has anybody got any questions for Kris? No? Okay. So Michael Hoffman says, well done. Thanks a lot.
Thanks,
okay.
Mark.
So we're joining back up at 11:10 with Merlin. So you've got 10 minutes and we shall be back.